It was a quiet afternoon in downtown Tampa. People walked past, eyes glued to their phones, lost in their own world. No one noticed the man sitting on the cold pavement, his clothes tattered, his hands trembling from hunger. He had been there for hours, watching the world move around him like he didn't exist. Then he saw her, a woman stepping out of a sleek black car, dressed in an elegant suit. He had no idea who she was. To him, she was just another stranger with a life far removed from his own. With a dry throat and a pounding heart, he lifted his gaze and asked, "Ma'am, can you give me $1?" He had asked hundreds of people the same question that day. Most ignored him. Some shot him looks of disgust. But this woman, her reaction was about to change everything. Pam Bondi stopped. She looked at him, really looked at him. And then, she did something no one saw coming. The man whose name was Charlie had once been someone people admired. He had a job, a family, a home, but life has a way of flipping in an instant. A tragedy struck, debts piled up, and before he knew it, he was on the streets, reduced to a number in the homeless statistics. As he sat there waiting for rejection, Pam knelt down in front of him. Her expression was unreadable. Was she about to scold him, call security? Instead, she asked, "Why $1?" Charlie hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. He swallowed hard and said, "I just need something to eat, just enough for a sandwich." Pam reached into her purse, but instead of pulling out a dollar bill, she did something that made the people around them stop and stare. She sat down, right there, on the dirty pavement, next to Charlie. The world around them kept moving, but for a moment, it was just the two of them. And then, she asked something that nearly broke him. "When was the last time someone had a conversation with you?" Charlie's lips trembled. He looked down, blinking rapidly. I don't remember." Pam nodded, as if she understood something he couldn't put into words. And then, she made a phone call. Who did she call? Was she about to have him removed? Or was something much bigger about to happen? The answer would leave everyone speechless. Charlie shifted uncomfortably. People usually tossed him loose, changed to make themselves feel better, but no one ever talked to him, no one ever sat down beside him, and certainly, no one ever made a phone call in his presence, at least, not one that involved him. Pam held the phone to her ear. Her expression was unreadable. A few seconds later, she spoke. "Hey, I need a favor. Can you meet me on Franklin Street?" "Yeah, it's important." Charlie looked at her, his throat dry. He wasn't sure whether to feel hopeful or afraid. He had seen the way people in power handled the homeless before. It usually didn't end well. Pam hung up and turned to him. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated before mumbling. "Charlie." She nodded. "Charlie, have you eaten today?" He shook his head. "Not since yesterday morning." Pam stood up and dusted off her suit. Then she did something unexpected. She held out her hand. "Come with me." Charlie blinked. People usually avoided touching him, as if poverty was contagious. But here she was, standing in front of him, waiting. For the first time in years, someone was giving him a choice. And so, with shaky hands, he reached out and took hers. A few minutes later, Charlie found himself inside an upscale cafe. He could feel the eyes on him, judging, whispering. He knew what they were thinking. What is he doing here? Pam didn't seem to care. She ordered 2 meals and gestured for him to sit. "Eat first," she said. "We'll talk after." Charlie hesitated, then took a bite. The moment the warm food hit his tongue, his body reacted before his mind could catch up. He ate like a man who didn't know when his next meal would come. Pam watched in silence, letting him finish before she finally spoke. "Charlie, tell me, how did you end up here?" He wiped his mouth, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Most people didn't want to hear his story, but for some reason, he found himself talking about the job he lost, the medical bills that drained his savings, the family that walked away when he had nothing left to give. Pam listened to every word. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer empty sympathy. She just listened. And then, when he was done, She leaned forward and said something that made his heart stop. "I want to help you, but only if you're ready to help yourself." Charlie stared at her. "What do you mean?" Pam smiled. "You'll see." Just then, the cafe door swung open. A man in a dark suit walked in, scanning the room until his eyes landed on Pam. He approached their table and extended a hand. "Charlie, this is James," Pam said. "He runs a shelter and job placement program, and he's got an opportunity for you." Charlie's head spun. This wasn't what he had expected when he asked for $1. "You don't have to say yes," Pam said gently, "but if you're ready to turn things around, this could be your chance." Charlie swallowed hard. For years, he had dreamed of a second chance, but now that it was right in front of him, fear gripped his chest. What if he failed? What if he wasn't good enough? James must have seen the hesitation in his eyes, because he said, "No one expects you to fix everything overnight. But if you're willing to take the first step, we'll walk the rest of the way with you." Charlie felt a lump form in his throat. He glanced at Pam, who gave him an encouraging nod. And in that moment, he realized something. Pam Bondi hadn't just given him $1. She had given him a chance to rewrite his story. That night, Charlie didn't sleep on the street. He had a roof over his head, a warm bed, and for the first time in years, hope. And the next morning, he showed up at the shelter, ready to take the first step. Not everyone gets a second chance, but sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to see beyond the surface and offer more than just spare change. Would you have done what Pam did? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, share this story.